Hi, how's it going? My name is Fiona. You're very welcome to my channel. I am a mom of three and I'm a yoga teacher, and I upload videos all about pregnancy, birth, parenting, breastfeeding, yoga. So today's video is all about talking to our children about sensitive topics such as consent, sex, porn, periods, puberty, and things like that. But before I get stuck into my 5 tips that I am going to give you today about this, I would love if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, and share it if you feel that you know somebody that might benefit from this content. So I have 5 tips that I want to share with you today that I am using and I have used over the past few years with my children. My children are 10, 7, and almost 4, but I really feel that this is a topic that every parent should be researching and finding out about, like, from very early on, even if you're just pregnant or thinking of having kids. I think it's a really important topic to be knowledgeable on because it's inevitable that it's going to come up, and you want to be the person that your child comes to with questions or, advice. You really want that, because otherwise they will go to their peers or the internet, and God only knows what they will find. So just to say, I am not an expert on this topic, but I am an expert on my children, and I know that these have worked and are working for us right now. Tip number 1 is to start the conversations early. And I mean, like, you can start talking to your child about these kind of things or bring them into your parenting from as early as when they're still in nappies, as in, you might be changing your baby and you might be talking about what you're doing. You mention, now I'm wiping your penis or your scrotum or whatever. Use the correct terms for the genitals of your child. I think that's really important, because if at some stage something happens, they need to know the correct terms, and you just say it like you would any other part of the body. That's your arm, that's your vulva, it's just, that's what it's called, and I think that's like, so they're like, I'm just giving you that as an example, but from really early on. And children are inquisitive. From as soon as they can start to talk, they will ask you questions about what you're doing and about your life, and that's a perfect opportunity, like if something comes up, just to tell them matter-of-factly, just as if you'd be talking about anything that's of interest to a child. And trust me, they have so many mad and crazy interests, but they won't attach any stigma to what you're talking about. They might be like, oh mom, what's that, like a sanitary pad or something, and you can just say, oh well, mommy, bleeds once a month. You can go into as little detail as you want. That might be enough for them to just know that, okay, that happens once a month. And then the next time they ask, you might add in a bit of extra information. So I think it's just to be really open, and from a very early age you can do that. The same with consent. I don't like the way you touch my hair like that. Please don't do that. That is teaching them, okay, she doesn't like that and she's told me. So that's consent. And I think modeling it like that is really important, because they'll understand and they'll feel, okay, well, if I don't like that, that touch or that whatever, I can say it too. So I think, starting early is really important. I think it's especially important when our children get to the kind of 7, 8-year-old mark, because they sometimes can change and become a little bit more kind of squeamish, or like, not as open to talking about things like that. So getting in early, before that, when they're still like little scientist minds, then is really important. So keeping that, keeping those channels of conversation open and as early as you can. Tip number 2 is consistency. So if you think about this as you would like learning anything in particular, like learning that on a cold day we wear a coat, or, before we go to bed we brush our teeth, and that is not something that you can just say to your child once and they'll remember it for the rest of their lives. You have to kind of repeat and be consistent, and that's normal. Like that's what you do. That's how children learn, and they see you doing it, and then they also do it, and it becomes kind of a habit. So the same goes for talking about sensitive topics. Like, you don't want to just have the talk when your child is 10. number one, they probably know a lot about it already at that stage, or you've heard about it from their friends. And or maybe number two, then they don't want to talk to you about it because it's kind of like, oh, why would I talk to my mom about that? I've never talked to her about it before. So being consistent from an early age, and then like just bringing it up, bring it into conversation. And if you don't know how to bring it into conversation, or don't feel comfortable, you can use a book and read it with your child. I don't really think getting a book and just giving it to your child and saying, look, that's for you to read on your own, kind of, that sends out a message that that's not really something you're comfortable with. So, if you do need like that, to do it with something like some resource, that's fine, but do it with your child and learn together and chat about it together. They will be really interested in it. It's interesting talking about sex and understanding how babies are made and where they come from and everything. And children are naturally interested in babies, so it can be an easy one to bring up as well. So it's really, really, consistency, I think, is actually the most important tip that I'm going to give today, because I think it's where a lot of us fall down when we don't talk about these things often. Then it just feels like it's not something that we can talk about, or that's how our children might feel. They might feel, oh, we would never talk about that, so maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's not something that is talked about in our family. Whereas you want it to be something that is just normal, that we talk about these things because they're interesting. And if we do it at a young enough age, we start young, then it just becomes part of family life and just normal. But it does need to be consciously consistent. Okay, tip number 3 is make it age appropriate. I kind of touched on this a little bit already, but you can add in more detail as they get older, and they will have questions. And like, even if you don't know the answer in the moment, you can say, well, I actually am not sure about that, but I'm going to find out, and we'll chat about it again. And then in a day or two, when you've researched and you've decided, how you want to approach it, and say, oh, remember we were chatting about that thing before? Well, I found this really interesting information, and then you can just go at it from there, and yeah, being age appropriate is important, especially if you're starting from an early age, as I said, because kids they accept things, and like, they might just move on then to the next thing straight away, even if you're like, oh my God, they're asking the question. I remember the first time, like, oh my God. And then it's just, as soon as they finish one question, they're on talking about like foxes or something completely unrelated. I remember the first time I actually explained sex to my children. My eldest was 8 and my middle child was 6, and it was actually really normal. And I kind of was like, actually, I probably should have done it with my eldest when she was 6, because I felt like later on I got a book and we were reading through a book, and at one stage it was like, oh, one of the characters in the book was embarrassed about, learning about this thing, and my 6-year-old was like, why would they be embarrassed? That's so weird. Like, it was just so, it was just such a weird concept to him that somebody would be embarrassed talking about this. Because it's just normal. It was like, this is really interesting. This is how babies are made, and this is what happens. This is how they're born. The more you talk about it as well, the more comfortable you will be talking about it, if it's something that maybe wasn't talked about much when you were growing up. And when I was growing up, there were completely different times. There was no internet. It was very different. And I think it's so important now that we as parents, just grab hold of the importance of this topic, and really, like, we owe it to our children really to inform them. And being informed doesn't take away their innocence. It's a really interesting topic. Being informed means that if something happens to them, they're able to come back and tell us exactly what happens. So number 4 is to model or be a role model for your children. So you yourself need to be comfortable talking about these things. I think it's really important, and it's something that we probably need to work on before we start talking to our children about it. So like, if you have a very young child, this is something you can get used to. You can talk to your partner, to your friends. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, just talk to your phone or to the mirror or something, to get used to talking about things. And the first few times it might sound weird, and then you realize actually your child has a right to know, these things. And yeah, it's great. Like, And you'd be surprised how topics will come up. Like, we have a dog, a female dog, and she gets a period twice a year. And my kids know that I get a period, and they know that our dog does. And we've talked about it so much, it's like a great topic of conversation. And it's actually, I think, really healthy, like it's just makes so much sense. So yeah, model being comfortable talking about these things. And that way your child will know that they can come to you, if they have questions, or if something happens to them that they're like, what's going on here? For example, like recently I put up a video about menstrual cycle awareness. So I was reading and studying a lot about periods, and I didn't hide it, like I have all the books around the house and stuff, and my kids know that, and they ask me. I was also doing a course on yoga for the menopause, and like my kids know all about the menopause because I told them what was on the course, and it just was a topic of interest because I was studying it, and they're like, oh, that must be interesting for my mom, so I wonder what it's about, so I think that's a great way to show like that we're always learning, and like that they can learn what we're learning as well. So number 5 kind of leads into this nicely, because it's to have a large variety of like books and resources around to do with all these topics. So as I said, I have all the books on periods. I have a lot of books on birth because I teach yoga for pregnancy and birth, and we talk about birth a lot, and my kids know all about the stages of birth and the placenta and all about breastfeeding and everything, because I guess it's of huge interest to me. And that's great, because it means that they see that this is something interesting, it's something normal, it's something we can chat about, and seeing all those kinds of books it's really good. Even if they've never like pick up the book and read it, even just seeing the titles and all that is just really positive. So that's partially role modeling, and it's also just having all those resources around, and then having some age appropriate books for them as well, so you can read through it with them and chat about it, and there might be pictures they'd like to look at and things like that too. There are my 5 tips. A lot of what I've learned comes from a person called Sarah Sproul. She's absolutely amazing. I binged watched her YouTube channel, and I'm going to link it below because she's fantastic. She's like a sex educator. She's got like a master's in it and everything. She's fantastic. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting that she said, and it was to do with porn, and I think I just want to mention it because I did mention that as one of the topics. It's really, really good to talk to your children about what is shown in the media, like how topics are portrayed in the media and how it is in real life. So for example, you might talk about sex in the media and explain how, TV shows aren't real, like they make everything dramatic and kind of sensational, more interesting, and and the same goes for sex in the media. It's not like that, and I think when kids start to realize that, it's like, oh, okay, so that's not actually what it's like, but that's what it's like on TV. It kind of can make them understand that the difference between, pornography and reality. And I think that's really good for them to understand before they see any porn, because they will see it. And so that they know when they do see it, it's like, oh, that's that thing that mom was talking about. It's not real. For my kids, I think it makes a lot of sense, because I often go on about how birth is portrayed in the media as being really dramatic and unrealistic. And they know that, like, that's how I see it, and that's the reality. It's not like that. So like they could immediately go, oh, that's the same, it's just completely over dramatized. Yeah, so I just thought I'd mention that because I think it's really makes such sense, and it's a really easy way to kind of break it down and for a child to understand. So there are my 5 tips for talking to your children about sensitive topics. I think it's such an important thing to kind of think about if you're a parent or a parent to be. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and share, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks a million for watching. Take care.